In the western direction is that place of the buffalo. It's that place of sunset. It's a place of looking within and spending time alone. In the northern direction is the time of winter. It's that time of seeing things clearly and using our wisdom. The animal of that direction is the wolf. And then finally in the east, that place where the sun rises, the spring of the year, the animal of that direction is the eagle, who can see clear and far. This is a circle story, and I hope you find yourself somewhere on that circle. Once there was a mouse. And in so many ways, she was just like any other mouse that maybe we've seen before. Her nose very close to the ground, spending all her time and energy gathering seeds, collecting grasses, and very rarely looking up. But she was different, and she knew it. This mouse would raise her head, whiskers twitching in the air, and she would hear a sound in her ears, a roaring sound that she knew was something that she did not understand. Now, most of the time, she would put her head back down to the ground and try and ignore that sound that she knew she heard in her ears, but it was there. One day, she went over to the edge of the place where the mice lived, her tail crooked on her back, whiskers twitching, listening to this sound that she knew she heard. And she thought, maybe if I ask another mouse, they can tell me what the sound is. She went over to another mouse, tapped him on the shoulder and said, excuse me, I know you're busy with your close examining, but do you hear a sound in your ears? And that mouse turned to her and said, are you foolish? We don't hear those sounds. Put your nose back down. Forget about that. Get back to work. And she tried to for a while, but she couldn't. She knew she had to find out what that was. One day, sitting all alone, she listened to the sound that she heard in her ears, when all of a sudden she was interrupted by another friend who said, hello, little sister. What are you doing here? She looked over and saw a raccoon, and she said, oh, raccoon, I hear a sound in my ears. The others think I'm foolish, but I know I hear it. Raccoon said, little sister, the sound that you're hearing is the great river, and I can show you the great river. All you do is follow me. Now, she knew that she had never left this place called home, and she knew if she traveled down a new path, there would be eagles that could swoop down and eat her, but she had to go. She followed Raccoon down a path that she had never been down before. There were new smells and new sights, and she looked up occasionally to see if there was an eagle, but she had to follow him, and finally he stopped. And where he stopped, there was a great river, something she had never seen before. Such a great body of water crashing on its course. She had to get up on her hind legs to even see the other side. And then Raccoon said that he would introduce her to a friend and pointed out in a called place in the river there was a big green lily pad. And on that lily pad, a frog who said, hello, little sister. She looked out and said, how can you be out there? Aren't you afraid? He said, I'm not afraid. I'm a frog. I live on the water. I live in the water. This is my home. Why would I be afraid? He said, little sister, do you want some good medicine? She shook her head. Frog said, all you have to do is crouch down as low as you can go, and then I want you to jump to as high as you can jump. And so she did. She crouched on her small hind legs, and then she jumped as high as she could jump in the air. And at the peak of that jump, she looked out, and for the first time in her life, she saw the sacred mountains before she fell back to the earth and landed in the river. Now, she had never been in water before, and she swam back to the shore. So frightened, she got out and said, Frog, you tricked me. He said, I didn't trick you, little sister. You tell me what you saw when you jumped. And then she remembered the vision of the mountains, and she said, I saw snow-covered mountains. Frog said, yes, and you have a new name. We're going to call you the Jumping Mouse. Now she ran back home, hoping that she could grab one of her fellow mice and tell them what she had seen. And she said, I saw the great river and I saw the sacred mountains, but they took one look at her. They saw that she was wet. It had not rained in days. They thought that she had been eaten by an animal and spit back out again. They said, if they didn't want you, we don't want you. And that's when she knew she had to leave this place that she had always called home. Now she headed out to the edge of that place in the prairie in front of her. She knew it was a dangerous journey, but she also knew she had to leave and go to the sacred mountains by herself. She crouched down in the grass, knowing that the eagles that flew above could swoop down and eat her, but she had to go. And she ran low in the grass as hard as she could until she got to a clump of bushes, and she dove in and caught her breath. On the other side of those bushes, she found an animal lying on the prairie so big that it took her a long time to walk all the way around this animal, walked across the hump on his back until finally she was staring into great big eyeballs. She had no idea it was a buffalo. She walked up and said, "Why are you here?" And the buffalo looked up and spoke in a voice that was sick and weak and said, "I will die here. The only thing that will save me is the eye of a mouse, and we all know there's no such thing as mice." She stood back, knowing she couldn't leave such a great being to die there on the prairie, and with all her courage walked up to that buffalo and said, "If it will make you whole, you can have my eye." And the minute she finished speaking, her eye came from her skull. The buffalo stood up and was well again, and turned to the mouse and said, "I know you're on your way to the sacred mountains. I will take you there. All you have to do is run underneath my belly, and the eagles will not be able to see you. You'll be safe." They ran together across the prairie, and it was frightening for her, for she had given up one of her old ways of seeing. And the ground shook around her as the buffalo took a step, but they arrived safely in the sacred mountains. The buffalo said, "I will leave you here. My feet are made for the prairie. I can't climb with you, but you can always find me here." And so now, with one eye gone, she climbed up into the mountains until she came to an outcrop of rock. And there, in the middle of the day, in the middle of that rock, was a timber wolf, sitting there all by himself. The mouse walked up to the wolf and said, "Brother Wolf," and as if snapping out of a trance, he said, "Wolf, that's right, I'm a wolf." She said, "What's the matter with you?" He said, "I've been sitting here all day and I don't know why. I've lost my memory, and the only way I can regain it is if I have the eye of a mouse." She stood back and said, "One of my eyes will make the wolf whole again. I can't leave him here like that." And with her heart beating in her chest and all her courage, she walked back up to the wolf and said, "Brother Wolf." He said, "Wolf, wolf, that's right. Wait a minute. I'm a mouse, and if it will make you whole, you can have my eye." And when she finished speaking, her eye came from her skull, and the wolf was whole again with a memory. Only now she had given up her old way of seeing. The wolf guided her on his back into the sacred mountains. He gently let her down on the edge of the medicine lake. He described the snow-covered mountains all around her, and he said, "I must go now and leave you here." She said, "That's all right. I know that you are the one that will lead others to this place." And as she sat on the edge of that medicine lake, she knew it wouldn't be long before one of the eagles who flew high in the sky would swoop down and eat her. And sure enough, as she sat there came the sound of wind and wings. They got closer and closer, and the eagle hit, and Jumpy Mouse went to sleep. And she was surprised when she woke again. And when she woke, she could see. Although all the colors were blurred in front of her face, she waited to see what would happen next. She heard a familiar voice that said, "Little sister, would you like some good medicine?" She shook her head. Frog said, "All you have to do is crouch and jump again." And so she crouched and jumped, but this time rose higher and higher. And the higher she rose, the clearer her vision, until finally she realized that there was wind underneath her own strong wings, where she had turned into an eagle and flew over those sacred mountains. And that's a story called The Jumping